Blended families are becoming more and more commonplace, but dealing with exes, children, and family traditions can make blending anything but smooth. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Blended families.
Welcome to another episode of The Big E, the Elephant in the Room. Today we will be talking about blended families. My name is Melissa,
Hi, I'm Jackie.
and today we have a wonderful couple that was willing to come on and talk with us today about blended family. Mr. and Mrs. Walker, also known as Miss Rochelle and Mr. James. Hello, how are you today?
Hello.
I'm doing
You can drop the title as James and Rochelle.
James.
We're not that formal. Hello, everybody, and thank you for inviting us to this I guess discussion and conversation.
Well, thank you for joining us and being part of this wonderful episode. So, as I discussed earlier, that we will be discussing blended families. Rochelle and James actually are a blended family, and we thought this couple would be a great individuals to discuss about their experience and how they came together. So, let's just jump in. So, James and Rochelle, can you just tell us a little bit about yourselves, how y'all came together, and how y'all brought your blended family together as one?
Well, we met in church. We both served on the usher ministry together. I'm divorced, he's a widower. And so we just served a ministry together, and that was about it till his wife passed away. And then we had a little carnival at church. He asked if he could walk around with me at the carnival. He may not say anything, but he just needed company. So we walked around for over an hour, him not saying anything. Finally, I'd had enough. And, and I'm walking back to my car. So he walks me back to my car, and he wants to know if he can take me to dinner just to say thank you. Well, that wasn't necessary. I'm thinking, really? Take me to dinner just because I walked around with you? So I gave him my number. He called probably a couple of weeks later, asked me out for dinner, said he would come and pick me up. And I said, I'll meet you there. He's on the other side of town. He lives on the west side. I live on the east side, but he was not coming to my house because I don't know that much about you. So we went to dinner and things progressed. It was probably a year on and off that we kind of dated, and then things started to progress. So you can take it from there.
Yeah, so this is something that we both did, I'm sure, but I know that I prayed and over this because I was not interested in another relationship because I was married for quite a while and had a good marriage, and didn't want to take a chance of blowing anything. So I prayed over it, but God gave me the courage to move forward with this relationship. So I asked her out to dinner sometime later, and this was going to be the day that I proposed to her. And I got to the restaurant before she did, and I asked the waiter to kind of go with me on this deal. And I ordered a glass of red wine, and I put the engagement ring in the red wine. And so when he delivered the wine, I mentioned that, is there something in your drink? And she she looked at it like,
I said, if there's something in there, then he's just going to have to bring me another glass of wine. He said, no, we can take that out. I said, no, you can just bring me another glass of wine. He said, well, let's just see what it is first. So we get a spoon, and I go down in the glass, and I said, oh my God, somebody's ring is in my glass.
yeah.
Was not looking for that to come at all. That was just like the least that I was even expecting.
So that's how it started, and of course it progressed from there. Now, when we got married, we were both how can I say, empty nesters. I had one son, and he lived in the Cleveland area. So he was in his 30s at the time. And so her sons were
Oh, geez, we've been married, what,
15,
15 years, so. But they were on their own, they had their own apartments and, but when I told them that, they referred to him as Mr. Walker, because serving in the ministry, he was Mr. Walker to them. So when I told them, and they looked at me like, Mom, a cop? Really? You're gonna marry a cop? Why a cop, Mom? I said, well, that's just who the Lord brought to me. So
that's how it was.
I was actually going to ask you, how did your children respond if they were younger, especially if they were in the household? Because there's another dynamic that comes along with that.
Right.
So since they were older, it still had some type of impact, it sounds.
It did, because my boys are, the oldest one at least is a mama's boy.
Big time.
And he saw some of the stuff that I went through with his dad. And so he's like attached to me at the hip. So he didn't want mama to be hurt at all. And so he was skeptical. Like, I don't know if I'm feeling this one right now, Mom. Like, really? I don't know. So yeah, they were feeling some kind of way. And his son, his wife didn't like me. She thought that I was just after him for.
No, it wasn't my wife. Oh, my son's wife.
Yeah, his wife.
My son's
his
wife.
son's wife.
Right.
She didn't like me at all. So
Yeah.
she put all this false information into his head.
Oh, wow.
And it was ugly. Even
She
to the
was
point
ugly.
she was ugly. I mean, she had an ugly spirit.
Yes.
And they had a son that's 3 years old and gravitated towards me. So when she found out that I was going to marry James, she wouldn't allow the grandson to hang around me
For me.
or him. So
Yeah.
you can take it from there.
Well, that's about the size of it. It took, oh my God, till my grandson actually graduated from high school that he started making his own decisions. But yeah, my son had a difficult time with the marriage, because I mean, all he knew was me and his mom, and he wasn't over the death of his mom, and even today he still is not, and that's been 17 years ago. But he has come around now. He's matured, and of course, my grandson had no issues because Rochelle is a sweet spirit, and so he had no problem with it whatsoever. Still doesn't. He still doesn't. And he's 21 now. And her biological grandchildren were not born before Rochelle and I got married. So all they know is me as Gramps. That makes it
A
easier.
little easier, yes.
Makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, so they don't have any issues with him.
No.
But I had to have a conversation with his son when it was just one-on-one, because he was feeling some kind of way. So I had to tell him my story to make him understand that I wasn't after his dad. His wife had put in his head that I was seeing his father while he and his mom, while James and his first wife were together. So I was having an affair, and that's what she put in his head. So I had to tell his son, this was not happening. Your daddy was the least of my concerns. He was not even on the radar screen. We just ushered together. End of story. And then he started to come around after we had like a 2-hour sit down at the table, just me and him. I said, okay, here's my opportunity. Let me just clear the air and make our relationship better. So he's not feeling some kind of way.
So you explained nicely about the children and the grandchildren and the family. How did your community and church receive you all's union?
Part of the community was good. The other part was kind of ugly. Got ugly cards. Like after he proposed to me, like, you really don't want to marry her. She's A, B, and C. Yeah, it was just ugly. It was just ugly. I mean, the devil was truly busy trying his best to split us up. I was everything but my name.
To me, it was comical because this anonymous letter came from somebody anonymous, of course. And I didn't know a lot of people in church that well. You know, I knew a few, and it was a large church in Columbus, Ohio. It was a large church, so I didn't know, you know, everybody. Being in the usher ministry, you know, you greet people, but you don't get to know their names, all of them. You know, the regular ones you do, the old saints you do. So I had no clue who had this issue. I did find out later that it's still, like I say, comical. There were a lot of folks still trying to get me, and I had no clue because I'm not into that. And at that time, I was still an active trooper, and I was one of the senior staff members. So I guess somebody broke it down to me. Well, James, you got a nice career, and you got, you know, this, that, and the other, and you're a hot commodity. And I, of course, never looked at myself at that.
Very humbling.
Truly. So I was surprised that women in the church, and even some out of the church I didn't know, had I guess they were upset that I didn't choose them, I guess. And I didn't know who they were. I had no interest in anybody because God led this. Now, I didn't want to get remarried. You know, this was not a game plan of mine. But God led it, he orchestrated it. So she was in my vision, and that's what God had placed there. So I didn't see anybody else.
Because in my first marriage, my ex-husband, I could count on one hand the number of times that he went to church with me and the boys. He had a daughter as well, so there were 3 of them. And that's another dynamic for another day, but she didn't like me at all. But anyway, the boys were at church with just me. So the church really never saw me with a man. And then we divorced. I've been at the church like 25, 26 years. James had only been there, what, 10?
Oh God, no, not that long.
5?
Maybe 5.
He'd only been there 5 years. So the church knew me, but they didn't know me with anybody else. So, okay, he's a widow. Now she's just gonna go after him. So you can understand how the attacks came.
So I have just a follow-up question. When you were directly talking about James's son, what was that relationship? What happened again? Because we were talking and we just need a little bit more clarification. If you can, you had said talking about James's son and the relationship directly that you two had. And when you said you sat down and were talking to him at the table.
Right. I didn't have any issues with Ronnie, but Ronnie was hesitant to get even close to me. Not that I hadn't done anything, but the ex-wife had planted all this negative information into his head that I was after his dad, that I was having an affair prior to his mom passing. If I called the home to remind him of usher meeting, I always left a message on the voicemail. I would say, Deacon Walker, this is Rochelle from the usher ministry, or I would say, Wanda, no, you weren't a deacon. I would say, Wanda, this is Rochelle from the usher ministry. If you just let James know we got a meeting, give her all the information and be done. So I wasn't even trying to go after him, but he had all this information in his head from the wife.
At the time, Rochelle making the calls, she was the president of the usher ministry. That's why she's calling everybody to make sure they get to the meeting.
I also wanted to find out, I know coming up in church, I remember this is years ago, and I remember a lot of people saying in church how if someone were to get a divorce or separate, that they had to wait till that spouse died in order for that person to remarry. Have you ever heard of that type of practice in the church and in community? You never heard of that?
I have.
I have not, no.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the religion or the doctrines. But I know when I was coming up in my particular church, a lot of people said, well, if something were to happen, you have to wait till that spouse dies, because basically you're supposed to work things out regardless of the situation. If you get divorced, now of course, if one of them were to die or to pass away, then it would be a green light to go ahead and remarry with no problems.
Mhm.
So I'm just wondering how, if that affected you, but it didn't. So no
No.
worries there. Yeah.
No.
So, Jackie, I'm going to piggyback on that because actually, that is something I heard, of course, in the denomination that I affiliate with. They said you can't get married if you divorce, only if the spouse actually passed on. And I actually, just to piggyback on what Rochelle and James were recently talking about their experience, I was actually formally divorced, formally married and then got divorced from my ex-husband. And I felt kind of a certain way. I think a lot of it was because my parents were married for almost like 50 something years. And I said, oh my goodness, this is going to be such an embarrassment to them. This is going to make me feel a certain, look a different way towards them to say, why is my child getting divorced, and how's the congregation going to look at her being divorced? And and when I looked at the bigger picture, when it was all said and done, my parents actually supported me. And they said, you have to do what's best for you. You cannot worry about what anyone else is thinking, what anybody else is saying. You're in that relationship. They're not in that relationship. Then moving forward, to also piggyback on what Rochelle and James, I actually remarried. And actually, James and Rochelle were actually part of our wonderful marriage when we got married. Actually were part of the marriage. They were part of the ceremony. They actually signed our marriage certificate. So it is truly, truly an honor to know that, like you said, when God is in it, there's no mistakes, there's no hiccups. And but with being remarried and in a blended family, we came in. My husband is not a someone that likes to be on camera, so he told me I could speak on his behalf. So let me put it on record.
I wonder where Terry was.
I'm gonna get them.
Actually are going on 4 years of marriage. And when we actually came into one family, I had a son and my husband Terry had a son. At the time, I think Ryan was about 7 or 8, and TJ, he was in 8th grade going into 9th grade. So we did sit down before we even got married, and we did discuss how we were going to raise our children, to know that we were going to talk together and agree together on the same page. And then when the boys came to us, that it wouldn't be any hiccups, no mistakes, no, well, mommy said, or Mr. And my son Ryan calls my husband Mr. Terry. And so there was no hiccups in that. There were some tension sometimes when it came to um, the disciplinary pieces of the relationship, how each other should raise each other's child. But then when we realized that, they're still all both under the same household, so they follow the same rules, the same guidelines, and it took some time. Now, our oldest TJ, I call him my son. I call him my bonus son. He's considered my son. He did feel, I think, in some ways, we did have some tension at a lot of times, but we've learned over the years. TJ, he knows I'm not a hindrance. I can go back to a funny story. Actually, when we started dating, um, my husband is 10 years older than me. And he's proud of it. He'll always say, I married a young woman. um, I'll never forget, I had to take TJ, actually drive TJ to his mother's house and drop him off. And he asked me, and he had to go, he was he was in 8th grade, going into 9th grade. And he asked me, he said, what do you want with my dad? And I said, I like your dad. And I said, I love him. I said, we get along. We have a lot of great things in common. And he said, well, He said, well, why my dad? But why? And I said, TJ, I said, I love your dad. And um, I said, when people, come together and they fall in love, and, we both came from a different environment, of different relationships. We at one time didn't feel like we were going to remarry, but we realized as we started learning about each other that we were, God put us together and it was meant for us to be together. So, he was still very hesitant, and he would ask these small little questions here and there to kind of figure out, why is this woman with my father? What does she want? What does she want from it? And it's okay, because they're trying to protect their parent. Ryan on my other side, my youngest, he was just so happy. I guess his mother was getting married, and probably he was just so happy. He was like, whoo. But the fact that we eventually, on a spiritual level, we came together and we were on the same page, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, and always put God first in everything that we did. Eventually, and I always said, it's how your actions. I never talked down, I never disrespected, I stayed the same person over the 4 years. And TJ realized I wasn't a threat. I was someone to enhance and bring more enlightenment, and bring a lot of more positivity to the household. And he can say now, he'll come to me, hey, Miss Melissa, and give me a hug. He texts me before he even went to college and say, thank you very much for everything that you have done for me with school, and thank you for making my dad so happy. And that, to me, sometimes you sit there and, like, you're doing all this stuff and you're like, well, when is it going to happen? And then it happens and you're like, okay, God, it's not in our time, but it's in his time.
Yeah.
So I thought, being in a blended family, I would tell my side of the story as well, on a younger perspective, coming in, actually younger marriage perspective, only being married going into 4 years. I thought my story would be an enlightenment to our audience as well, to just let everyone know it can happen. It is possible. You will have bumps in the road. So just, that was my piece of my story. I'm going to just jump in also back to James and Rochelle. Let me ask you a question. When it comes to, we're talking about holidays, we're in the holiday season. How do actually blended families incorporate old and new traditions? How did y'all directly deal with that coming in to your relationship?
Well, I'll go first because she's got a lot to say about that.
I do.
Yeah, you do. My family, when my mom and dad were alive, they lived in the Cleveland area, and of course Rochelle and I lived in Columbus area, which is about 2.5 hour drive between the two. I would always, if I was going to go home, I was going to, of course, be with my mom and dad. However, I didn't go home that often during the holidays, because if you know anything about Ohio weather, I might be able to get to Cleveland, but I might not be able to get back to Columbus, right, because the weather is so unpredictable, treacherous, cold, icy, snow. So I didn't go home a lot during the Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's time period for that very reason. If I did go back home, it was during Mother's Day or my mom's birthday, or just because, but it'll be during the summer. It'd be the summer and spring, and maybe the fall. But when we would get together, my brother who still lives in Ohio, he would do all the cooking and we would meet there. My other brother lives in California, so he couldn't come to do anything. My other brother lives in DC area, so he couldn't just pick up and go. So the holidays for me really wasn't special. Because of that reason, and probably because of my career, I rarely did I get off for holidays, because that's when most people are traveling, and that's when troopers got to be on the road. So holidays wasn't a big thing for me at all. We made the best out of it during the spring and summer and maybe the early fall. So holidays was not an issue for me as far as family gatherings, because we were all over the place. Now for Rochelle, whole different story.
Yeah, for me, holidays are special. I'm a big holiday person. I want family to be together, food at Christmas time, presents. And he wasn't accustomed to that. So it was difficult. Like, why are you doing all this? And so if the kids would come over, he kind of would just like wander off to himself and they would say, doesn't he want to be around us? Like, I had to like pull him aside and say, the kids feel like you don't want to be a part. So this is who I am. It's always going to be like that. And now that we have grandkids, 3 of them, it's even worse because I want to be with them. I want to just shower them with love. It's not about me. It's just like, how much can I pour out into them and set traditions, bake cookies. We have one girl and do crafts with her so they can give their parents gifts. It's not about how much money you have, but those little things that you do. So just that time together with them. And James to this day is still like that. He would send me back to Ohio and stay here and be perfectly content with eating a hot dog and some vegetable soup.
Homemade.
But for me, no, I want to be around family. So this year it's going to be a challenge because of the times, COVID. And so nobody can really travel and you're going to have to Zoom and that's not the same. My kids are still in Ohio and their dad is there, so they'll at least be able to see one another. But Mama, we want you to be here. They want Mama to be there so Mama can cook is what they really want.
It's been amazing, you all's experience in blended families. And my co-host, Melissa, thank you so much for sharing yours as well. In 60 seconds, what are the top 3 things you would give a recommendation for those who are coming together with their blended family? Top 3 things.
Well, for me, you gotta talk it through, because if you can talk it through, there won't be any surprises when things come up, such as holiday time or family time. So talk it through. You gotta let go of what used to be. There's no doubt, you know, mom or dad can't be with your biological mom or dad. So you got to let that go and have more focus on your mom or your dad, their happiness. I think if they can focus on the mom or dad's happiness, it becomes easier for the children, whether they be small or grown, to accept the blendedness of the families.
Mm-hmm. And try to be all inclusive, not it's your side versus her side. Just try to be all inclusive because we're all in this together.
Yeah. I would also say consistency. Be consistent in your communication and with each other. I would say being consistent. And like you all both said, communication is the key. And as long as you're setting that example, the children always eventually follow suit. So I think you said communication and just really being truly, that I think that's very important as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we just want to thank everyone for coming and listening to us via YouTube, Facebook. We want to thank everyone to just so much over the holidays. This is the time to come together, even though we're in a very uncomfortable time. We thought that this episode would be needed for blended families, just to put a different spin on what individuals deal with coming together during the holiday time. So we just want to thank you for watching The Big E, the elephant in the room, where we speak about the unspeakable.
Welcome to What's Going On? My name is Demita Joe. Each Wednesday, you can find me here at 3 p.m. I'll be over here discussing different things that are going on and try to bring you a boost of positivity for your week because we all need this. We're going to share some feel-good stories. We might find a hometown hero. We may take a look at some trending topics. And sometimes we might even find a lesson in a not-so-warm and fuzzy story if we can. I'm Damita Joe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode right here on What's Going On?
What they do that at? Cause we do that though. I see you talking, so we gon' take it though. And yeah, talking cheap, so don't do that though. My click 100 deep.
This is Tyron
and Nicole with your weekly RATV news break. Each Thursday at 12 noon Eastern, we'll come to you with the latest news, trends, and more with a positive spin.
We know there's a lot of positive news that doesn't get reported, but we want to give you the opportunity to share your story here on RATV. If you have a positive news story you want us to share, you can submit your story to news@re-tv.net.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Relationship Entertainment Television YouTube channel. Download the new RATV Live app on your mobile device and follow Relationship Entertainment Television on your favorite social media platform.
Don't forget, make sure you tune into the RATV News Break each Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Until then, be blessed and be great.
Hey, it's your girl Tia Robertson. I'm the host of Entrepreneur Insider. Every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern for entrepreneurs and news that you need to know about. See you there.
Growing up in the church, we saw a lot. Things that people refuse to talk about. The elephants in the room. Mental illness, sexual abuse, broken families, domestic violence, and so much more. The Big E, The Elephant in the Room, is a show that sheds light on these topics. We're here to speak about the unspeakable.